Hey guys, so I don't even know how to start this video, and last week I was gonna try to film, but I just couldn't. I didn't really know what to say yet. But I'm filming this video 9 days after George Floyd was murdered by police officer Derek Chauvin in Minneapolis. And as we all know, the country and the world just feels like it's been turned upside down with all the protests that are taking place, and I commend the peaceful protesters. And obviously going along with that, we've seen some not so peaceful actions taking place, and I don't really want to get into that right now. That's not really the point of this video, but I, as a white woman and someone who has white privilege, and I acknowledge that, I wanted to speak up about what's going on. I want to be able to use my white privilege to speak up in support of Black lives and speak up about how our system is broken and we have systemic racism in this country and all over the world, and we need to talk about it. We need to try to rectify it. The government obviously needs to play a role as well, because while we can speak and we can talk and have those conversations, we also need to have our government backing it up with action. So I think that's really important, and I think that those things need to go hand in hand, being able to talk the talk and walk the walk as well. I just want to say that Black lives matter, and we need to be able to give Black men and women in this country space so that they can speak and we can step back and listen. But I want to just do what I can with my voice and be able to speak in support of Black lives. And I just want to do my part, and I want to be able to learn and grow, and I want to be teachable, because I feel like as human beings, we're always evolving and learning and growing. So I want to be able to continue to learn and grow. So what I wanted to focus on in this video is talking about phrases that we need to just stop saying because they're unhelpful. So over the years, when we've seen case after case of Black men and women in this country being murdered by police officers, and then no justice being served, the Black Lives Matter hashtag was started, and we've seen it evolve into this movement, and it's a very important movement. But in response to the Black Lives Matter hashtag, we've seen two hashtags that are very concerning, and they are Blue Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. And those two phrases specifically, they're used as phrases and as hashtags. They need to go. We've all seen the American flag where it has the thin blue line to represent the police forces. It's so offensive because blue lives are not a thing. Being a cop is not a race. That's a job. It's a career. It's not something that you can't change and something that you're born with. It's like saying teachers' lives matter. Well, yeah, they're people. It's really concerning because blue lives, the police, they've always mattered in this country, and they've always had the control and the upper hand, and they've brutalized Black men and women in this country for hundreds of years, and it's still happening. And to say blue lives matter, when have they not mattered? It completely disregards the point that Black Lives Matter was started because still, right now, we live in a society where Black lives don't appear to matter as much as white lives. And that's obviously wrong, and it needs to change. And saying Black Lives Matter is giving Black lives a space and giving them a voice and trying to dismantle systemic racism in this country. Saying Blue Lives Matter as if somehow police officers are a race of people that have been brutalized for centuries and enslaved and segregated and discriminated against, disproportionately so, it's not accurate. It's an attempt to erase Black Lives Matter and try to change the conversation and act as if Black Lives Matter is somehow anti-police. So the next phrase that I want to talk about is all lives matter, and this is the same idea where usually white people say, what about all lives? All lives matter. We're all people matter. And like I said, obviously, throughout the course of history, that hasn't been the case. Black lives have been brutalized and segregated and enslaved, and it's not true that all lives matter in this country, because we see it. We see the systemic racism in this country. It's been happening since this country was founded. So saying all lives matter just diminishes the point of Black Lives Matter. All lives won't matter until Black Lives Matter. Right now, it's clear that Black lives do not matter in this country because we still have systemic racism, and Black men and women are still disproportionately targeted by police, brutalized by police, murdered by police. And then also, going back to the Blue Lives Matter, I will put links in the description below, but cops are almost never brought to justice. They're rarely prosecuted, even more rarely found guilty of murder when they're murdering Black men and women every day in this country. The idea that Blue Lives Matter and All Lives Matter were started in response to saying Black men and women are still being brutalized every day, they're still being discriminated against, and it needs to change. The idea that Blue Lives Matter and All Lives Matter were started to try to diminish that idea and that sentiment is really just wrong. It's wrong. So those two phrases need to just end, because there is that racism behind it. It says that, well, cops' lives matter. Well, duh, they clearly always have. But the conversation needs to be on the Black lives that are still being discriminated against and brutalized every day. Also, saying all lives matter, well, obviously white lives have always mattered. That's clear. You can see that over the course of history. The entire history of this country is white lives mattering and Black lives not. And Black lives, again, being discriminated against, brutalized by white people. So to say that Blue Lives Matter when they always have is disregarding Black lives entirely. Those phrases need to just stop. Another phrase that keeps creeping up that is very similar to Blue Lives Matter and All Lives Matter is not all cops are bad. I think the problem with that phrase is really perfectly illustrated in a stand-up bit that Chris Rock did. I believe it was in 2018.
Well, it's not most cops. It's just a few bad apples. It's just a few bad apples. Bad apple. That's a lovely name for murderer.
I want to read the quote to you because I think it just perfectly illustrates the problem with the not all cops phrase. Chris Rock said in his stand-up bit, "I know it's hard being a cop, but some jobs can't have bad apples. Everybody gotta be good. Like pilots. American Airlines can't be like, most of our pilots like to land. We just got some bad apples that like to crash into mountains. It's funny because obviously that sounds so absurd. It's like, how can you have bad pilots? And that's the point. How can you have bad cops when bad cops spoil the munch? And bad cops are murdering Black men and women in this country. And the good cops are complicit in it. They're watching it happen, like we saw in the case with George Floyd. The 3 other officers were completely complicit in it. They were watching it happen, and they said nothing. They did nothing. They ignored the witnesses who were begging Derek Chauvin to stop kneeling on George Floyd's neck. And where was the good cop in that situation? I didn't see one. And it's gotten to the point in this country where our police system needs to be completely reformed, and we need to demilitarize it. So if you're a cop, how can you be a good cop when all of this is going on? And if you go against it and you speak out against it, what happens to you then? What happens to your career if you speak out against people in your own police force, your coworkers, your friends, your bosses potentially? What happens to you? Are you going to be able to remain a cop if you take a stand, speak out, expose the wrongdoings of your fellow cops? I don't know. I don't know what a good cop looks like. I really don't. And saying not all cops are bad just ignores the fact that there is that sense of complicity among police officers. Even though the good cops, they might not necessarily be committing the brazen violence and the murders, but they're seeing it happen. They're witnessing it. And are they trying to reform the system from within? If they are, they'd have to be exposing everybody. They'd have to be exposing people within their own police forces. And I don't know how they'd be able to keep their jobs if they're doing that. So the idea that not all cops are bad, it's just offensive. If you're saying not all cops are bad, what does a good cop look like to you? Is it the cops who are hugging some of the protesters or chanting with them, marching with them? I think that's good. I'm glad that they're doing things like that. But then at the same time, you hear stories where right after those nice moments, they're tear gassing those protesters. They're putting back on their riot gear and are brutalizing the protesters that they were chanting with, marching with, crying with, hugging. I don't want to be a complete pessimist and think that it's all for show that they're doing that, but what can you say when they're on camera doing all these nice things, listening to the Black men and women who are talking to them and trying to explain their side and tell them their stories of what they've gone through? You see that on camera, but then they're still committing the violence right after that. What do you say to that? Is that the example of a good cop? I don't know. I don't know what a good cop looks like. And it feels harsh to say that there are no good cops, but what can you say when you either have the bad apples, which usually when we say that, that means the ones who are committing the violence, committing the murders against Black men and women in this country. But then what are the good apples? The good apples are the ones who are watching it and they're still on the police force. They're not exposing it. How can you say they're good apples? The bigger picture is that obviously in America, we need to completely reform our police forces. There needs to be training in de-escalation. We need to demilitarize the police, and it can be done. In other countries, they hardly ever even fire their weapons, if they even have guns at all. There's some police forces where they don't even have guns. And they use de-escalation techniques. It can be done. And can it be done here? I hope so. But unfortunately, I don't see any leadership with anyone in office who's truly fighting and speaking loud about actively fighting to change the police forces in this country. I feel like it would take a long time for that to happen because I feel like there's going to be a lot of pushback. But I think it's important that we keep raising our voices and we give space for Black men and women to speak so that we can listen and learn and be corrected if we need to relearn things. I think it's important to be able to listen and be teachable and learn from our mistakes when we make them. And it's important to use our white privilege to speak up and speak out against racism, speak out against everything that's wrong in our country, because we have that privilege to do that, and we should be able to be using our voices for good. I'm not perfect. I never have been. I never will be. So I'm sure if I say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, I hope that I can be held accountable, and I want to be able to be taught, and I want to keep learning. But I just want to say to everyone who's watching that I love you guys, and if you're a Black man or woman anywhere in the world and you're watching this, I see you and I love you, and I'm sorry for everything that's happened throughout the course of history, and I hope that we can all keep fighting to make things better. If you want to share your stories, your thoughts, your personal experiences in the comments down below, please do. I want it to be a safe space for everybody. I'll leave a bunch of links in the comments down below, articles. I'll leave the link to the Chris Rock stand-up bit in the comments as well, because I'm sure I can track it down somewhere. I'll leave links also to some helpful resources. Campaign Zero is really great. They're trying to fight to reform police forces across the country, and they have some really great policy ideas. So I'll leave their website in the description below, and anything else I can find, I'll just put it down in the description. I know everything is really chaotic right now, and it's a scary time in this country, and everything is changing every day, but I felt like it was really important to make this video, and I just hope you guys are staying safe. If any of you guys are going out peacefully protesting, please wear a mask and make sure to wear it over your nose, and bring hand sanitizer if you have it. Make sure to wash your hands before you leave. When you come back, wash your clothes immediately after, and shower, because even though it's great to get out there and protest, we do still have a pandemic. Make sure to take all the precautions that you can. Social distance if possible where you're protesting, and try to keep everyone around you safe as well. I will see you guys in my next video. Stay safe, and I'm thinking of you all.